push the record button. As requested, there was a couple other events going on, and a few chefs were really hoping to get this inside, sneak tour as well. So thank you very much for allowing me to record that, and everyone participating again and knowing that that's being recorded. So welcome everyone. This is our ACF Harrisburg chapter November meeting. We are hosting the meeting. However, we are being hosted by Samantha Johnson and Roberto DeTore. Thank you both very much for having us this evening. We're very anxious to learn about the Aquaponics program and everything you have to offer there at Agworks at the Commonwealth Charter Academy right there in Harrisburg. I say right there in Harrisburg, but it's right next door to Hack, where I work. So it's something that I see constantly and I think about all the time. And again, I've taken my students personally on a tour here. So I thank you very much for having us. At this point, I will hand it over to you. Thank you again.
All right, well, welcome to Agworks and welcome to CCA. Anybody can cook, and we remember that line from Disney Pixar's Ratatouille, which amazingly came out 13 years ago. Every time I think about a Disney Pixar movie, I can't believe how long it's been since it actually came out, but that's certainly one of my favorites and probably one of the best Disney Pixar movies to date. And now it's been 13 years, I shouldn't have to say spoiler alert. But just in case, I'm going to say spoiler alert. What evil chef or evil critic ego finds out is that anybody can cook doesn't mean everybody can cook. It just means that not everyone can be a great artist, but a great artist can come from anywhere. I didn't bring up Ratatouille as a sort of easy way to make a connection between CCA and Agworks, but there is a quote that reminds me, or that anybody can cook reminds me of, and it's a quote by a cartoonist, completely unrelated to Disney Pixar. Cartoonist's name is George Evans, and his quote is that every student can learn, just not on the same day or in the same way. And that is a big part of what drives us at CCA. As a cyber charter school, we are uniquely positioned to personalize instruction for every single one of our students. And in Ratatouille, Chef Gusteau's statement that anyone can cook is based on the belief that you must not let anyone define your limits because of where you came from. And we at CCA believe the same thing, that a child's zip code, socioeconomic background, family history, or disability, or any other status does not define or determine what they can achieve and what they can learn. So we're committed to preparing our students to succeed in life and to succeed in school and in life, and that's our mission. CCA Works, which includes Agworks, our first piece here in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, TechWorks that will be opening this coming school year in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and MedWorks, which we have planned for the 21-22 school year in outside of Philadelphia, all invite students to learn about and develop an interest in engaging family-sustaining jobs and careers in the fields of agriculture, technology, and medicine. By incorporating engaging teaching and state-of-the-art technology, our students can explore and kindle their own sparks of curiosity and find their own paths to success. With that in mind, the Agworks labs and programs are not limited to controlled system agriculture. As you learn more about Agworks, I hope you can think of ways to spark an interest in our students in cooking, nutrition, food preparation and food service and delivery, and any of the other jobs and careers that the American Culinary Federation and its members represents. Thank you for joining us here today at Agworks, which you'll see is a virtual background here for me. It looks a little bit like Epcot. That was my first impression when I came in October 2018. I'm like, wow, it's like Epcot here. But welcome to Agworks, and I'll let Sam take it away from here. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Roberto. Gave a great introduction overall to our program, and I'm actually really excited to be able to showcase what we have going on here. So another housekeeping item, just really quick, is that we do have a Q&A pod set up. As questions come in, I'll try to answer them on the spot. If I do get a lot of questions kind of coming through, which I highly encourage as we go through, if you have questions, please ask them in the Q&A pod. I might pause partway through and just answer the questions in bulk, about 10 minutes in, break, 10 minutes, break, 10 minutes. So it just depends on how many questions you guys have. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. One thing that you'll probably notice, chefs love fresh, organic, locally grown produce. So not only do we have produce, but we also have fish. So what this lab is, what Agworks at CCA is a grow facility. We do aquaponics, which is where you use fish and fish waste to grow plants. We have hydroponics, which actually falls under the same umbrella as aquaponics, but instead of a nutrient source coming from the fish, it can come from a variety of different places in hydroponics. And then we also have aeroponics here as well, which is a misting system for nutrients for its plant roots, all of which are very healthy forms of organic indoor eating. And what we strive for is great products, mainly because we want to be able to teach our students, just like Roberto said, those career readiness skills. We want all of our students, regardless of their background, to know the basics. What does a plant look like? In Harrisburg, we have students that come from Harrisburg School District, all the way up from Perry County to Poconos, that make the drive down to our facility to work from here. And what may be unsurprising to you guys as chefs is that students really don't know what their plants look like until you guys have a chance to serve them. So I'm the person that's growing it. I'm the person showing them how to grow it. That way, when we harvest and we do delivery, you guys and your customers enjoy what's on their plate. So part of that process, and actually the beginning of that process, starts with our fish. So some of you guys may be familiar with aquaponics. Some of you may not really have any idea of what I'm saying when I say aquaponics. So I'm just going to give you guys kind of a brief nitty-gritty tour of what aquaponics is, and then I can show you some of the other things we have going on in here. But we use tilapia. Tilapia is our main fish that we grow and harvest at Agworks. These guys behind me are actually in the smallest tank in our facility. I'll show you some of the bigger ones once we leave where I'm standing right here. Where I'm at is actually research and development, meaning this is an area that's closed off from our main grow area. So if you as a chef are like, hey, can you try prawn? Can you try catfish? Something other than tilapia. This is kind of our safe space that we can try to grow that type of fish for you for harvest. There may be some specialty items like trout or salmon that are more cold water fish that we need to kind of specialize this tank to get the temperature down. This is kind of that perfect place to trial and error. Right now, though, we do have tilapia. We chose tilapia because they're a very gritty fish, meaning that they can survive a lot that we throw at them. As a K through 12 facility, primarily, we need to make sure that all of our students feel comfortable in what they're doing. And sometimes accidents happen. And with tilapia, what's great is they can really take a lot of abuse. But we want to have the best growing environment for them possible, meaning that these guys actually power everything that I'm going to show you. We have our tilapia and our fish. They eat a lot of food. And excuse me, my kids love this, so I'm going to do it for you guys. But our fish, they eat a lot of food. They produce a lot of waste. I got my little poo emoji there. Now, that waste product, similar to cow manure, is what we use to spread, if you will, through water onto the roots of our plants. So fish eat a lot of food, produce a lot of waste. We don't want that waste to hang out in there because that would make the fish just relatively gross. And it's also not a healthy environment in their tank. So that fish and fish waste, that guy, eventually makes his way over here to what's called a clarifier. Now, a clarifier, my kids actually dubbed that the toilet. Again, kind of gross, but that is where the fish waste goes. But here is where that fish waste gets broken down. I'm very fortunate to work in this type of facility because unlike cow manure that you spread on fields that can saturate those fields, and it's not really the best and most sustainable environment, especially if you spread cow manure and it rains, and all of that waste product runs off into streams, that's shown to not be very good for our ecosystem. Whereas here, that waste goes right into this cylinder here that my kids call a toilet, but it's actually a clarifier. And what's great about this holding cell for waste is it gets broken down by bacteria. We have Nitrobacter, Nitrosoma bacteria. You guys don't need to remember that. But we have our bacteria here, our bad bacteria, but our good bacteria as well, that breaks that waste product down. So that way, as it travels from here, and I empty that guy out, it makes its way into our grow beds. Now, here is the first one in research and development. Again, these are actually relatively small beds versus the ones that I'm going to show you out there. But here we have peppers. We're growing lunchbox peppers. I will fully admit that part of that is pandering on my staff's part because they know I love lunchbox peppers, especially as they start to turn yellow and red. So we have our lunchbox peppers here, but we also have lettuce growing here and here. Now, all of these plants, what happens is it takes the fish and the fish waste. As it moves through these racks, these plants, the roots, will actually absorb all of those nutrients out of the water, which effectively cleans that water as those plants are growing and removing that waste. That way, that water, as it cycles back to the fish tank, is nice and clean, so it promotes a healthy environment again for our fish or protein source, but it also helps to provide us with fresh leafy greens. And as we kind of go out to our main system, you're gonna see a ton of different types and varieties of plants that we grow. So, very good question from Michael. He asked about the flavor of our tilapia, and I will share with this group, we actually did our very first harvest this week. We took about 15 to 20 fish. They were about this big. They were really big guys. We took over to Susquehanna Harvest, and their chef, PJ, is gonna prep them for us. He's probably prepped a few, but by the end of this week, we're gonna be reaching out to him to get his feedback on flavor. Because our fish, unlike some of the tilapia that you may get from a provider, ours are all grown in-house in the cleanest environment possible. Fish tend to absorb what is around them, and tilapia tend to get a pretty bad name because of poor farming practices. There are some providers outside of the states. They raise their tilapia in a very bad environment, mainly because they still survive. It forces the fish to get really big really fast, but overall it does impact the overall health of the fish, which impacts the flavor and all of the profile, even how kind of gummy sometimes fish can be. So I will have feedback on that by the end of this week. Ooh, how much food is required to produce 1 pound of fish, and what is the grow time to market? Very good question. So if we were pushing our fish to grow as fast as possible, we could have a fish ready to plate up within 6 to 8 months. Now in our system, as an educational system, we do breed our fish. We have held off on harvesting them for the last year and a half because we didn't really have a ton of fish. So we didn't want to give any of them away or sell any of them until we knew our system was up and running. And with aquaponics, it takes about a year and a half to get enough nutrients from your fish waste to power where all of your plants are growing. So now that enough time has passed, we're able to start measuring some of those variables, and we'll be able to have some of that feedback for the chefs. And Michael, your question too, when I get out into the main lab, I'm gonna show you how we're collecting data for that, because the pounds of fish to plant ratio for us is very difficult to measure because we have about 3,000 plants growing in our system at any given time. And most commercial aquaponic facilities, the way that they set theirs up is they grow one type of plant. And we've grown probably close to 250 varieties of plants because we want our students and also our chefs to have some say in what we're trying to grow and therefore what we're harvesting. So that question's a little bit difficult to answer, but over time, we're gonna have the data to be able to fully let the chefs know, hey, this is how much that ratio kind of equates to. Very, very good questions. So now that I kind of showed you some of the fish, now that I kind of showed you some of the plants, I just want to get some nitty gritty stuff taken care of for you and just kind of cover some of the basics of what we have going on. So a lot of chefs, they want to know, do you grow everything in your lab from seed? And the answer to that is yes and no. we have some trees out there that we did not grow from seed, for full transparency, mainly because it can take up to 2 years for some of those trees to fruit. And we wanted our students to have some bang for their buck before they graduate. But the majority of our plants, about 95% of our plants, we do grow from seed in a seed medium that's called rock wool. We also get almost all of our seeds from Johnny Seeds. But I wanted to give you kind of a close-up as to what rock wool looks like, because we don't have any soil in our system. We rely on water and the nutrients trapped in that water to help our plants to grow. And that water can very easily transfer into these cubes, which is where we put all of our seeds. And we do purchase organic seeds from Johnny Seeds whenever possible. Every once in a while, we do get kind of a weird and wonky request from a student, and unfortunately, they don't have organic seeds sometimes, but about 90% of our seeds are organic, and they germinate in about 1 week to 2 weeks in a tray that looks like this. And then once they germinate, they form the cotyledons or the true leaves, they're ready then to plant into our main system. Now, the other thing I want to show you here is my recently purchased corn plant, only because this guy here is kind of a good analogy for what I'm going to show you when we walk out into our main system, which is that in our system, because we're educationally based, our goal is to try out a bunch of different types of plants and varieties of fish, because it's fun for kids and it's also educational. But what you'll notice here, and that what we're trying to train our students to do, is identify that something like this on a corn plant that's starting to brown, or even something like on this side that it's starting to yellow, that's really not good. If this was a type of plant where we want to sell this to a chef and there's some discoloration in it, you guys aren't going to want to purchase that from us. So we need to start training our students on how to get the proper nutrient value in our plants. That way, again, when we harvest and bring them over to you guys, it actually tastes good. Now, I'm going to pause really quick and check out our Q&A pod. So when it comes to the amount of waste that is produced, we use tilapia because they honestly eat a lot of food and they also produce a lot of waste. The industry standard is that for every 10 gallons of water you have that's going through your system, you want 1 pound of fish. Now, it depends. You have to play around with that ratio a little bit if you're trying to grow big trees. But for us, what we find that grows best in aquaponics are leafy greens. And so we try to keep our stocking ratios a little bit lower than that. But if we were trying to grow something that was a flowering plant, for example, it requires a lot more nutrients. So in that instance, we may want a few more fish in our tank to help bulk up the amount of nutrients or waste nutrient-rich water that's flowing through our system. Very good questions. Now, last but not least, and I'm going to kind of step off to the side here so you can see it. Again, I'm in research and development. This lab is used to kind of play around. And it's also one of my favorite spaces to show chefs, because we have very high-powered, very fancy LED lights. And these LED lights have broad spectrum, so white light, which is great for all types of plants to grow. But as the grower for controlled environment agriculture growing inside, I can manipulate those lights. So as I step off screen here really quick so you guys are able to see it, I'm going to change our lights, and they're going to get real bright, back to the color that we're actually using right now in our lab. Now you'll notice this rack over here, we have more blue light versus this one right here where we have more red. Now research shows that you can actually play around with the light spectrum, and it does impact different types of plants in different ways. A lot of research scientists try to explain it as, trying to find the right recipe for the right plant. Some plants prefer more red light, some prefer more blue light, some like more green. It just depends on that type of plant. But the research right now isn't available for all types of produce to say, this is the best light spectrum to get the fastest growing plant with the most beautiful coloration. And for us, our students really love playing around with the lights because they can visually see differences in growth because plants grow differently, and I'll step off to the side. With red lights, they actually grow a little bit taller and their leaves get a little bit broader. Whereas with blue light over here, those plants get a little bit shorty and a little bit stockier, almost like the blues, like they're a little bit depressed, so they stay a little bit down. And so for us, that's a really great teaching tool for kids, because we want to try and grow as much as we can, as fast as we can, to sell to you guys. That way we make money. Now, that's kind of the career portion. For us, from an educational standpoint, we are competitively priced. I'll put that up for you guys. But the results of this experiment came back, and the red light is actually shown to get twice as much produce than this blue light. So what we did, as any good scientist would do, we flipped the beds, and we're repeating that experiment to see if we can get the same results. Because honestly, if the red light here shows to be the best, then when I walk out and show you the rest of the lab here, we'll wind up turning more of these lights to more of a reddish color. We're kind of repeating some of the great research that's being done at some of the bigger schools like University of California, Penn State University, University of Louisiana. They're starting to show that there's something called far red light spectrum that causes the plant to grow even better than when it's grown in sunlight. So very interesting kind of twists and turns as you go through and you try to learn about how you can grow as a grower the best, the fastest, because that also allows us to give you guys a lower price point as well. So all good questions. Oh, energy cost. So Derek, awesome question. So our energy cost for the lab is $0 because we do have solar panels on our roof. We did receive a grant that allowed us to install about 1,050 solar panels that 100% powers everything that you see here, and any of the extra energy goes to the other side of our building where our teachers are sitting. Are we able to grow root vegetables? So I'm gonna actually use that as an opportunity to show you guys our main lab. So right now, this was research and development. This was our smaller footprint. Now we're gonna head out to the main lab where I can go through and show you the types of plants we're currently growing, but I can also go through with you guys and show you, these are some things that we were able to grow successfully, and these are some things that weren't too hot. So bear with me. I am gonna pick this up and move around, but I am gonna try to be as even as possible, just so that way you guys don't get a headache.
May I ask you a question while you're doing so, please?
Oh, sure.
You hinted to it, and I think it's fantastic. So I wanted to ask, and I can't add it into the Q&A, sorry, but how do you determine what you plant and what you grow there?
So at Agworks, I love showing that sign. The way that we determine what we plant is kind of threefold. The first one is, as growers, we're interested to see if we can grow things like root vegetables. If we can grow different varieties of lettuce, because overwhelmingly that's what chefs in the local area have requested, but we always want to try and grow different types just to keep it a little bit jazzed up. We also rely on students and what students want to see. If they get really excited about something and it gets them into the field where they want to learn more about agriculture, they want to learn more about cooking, then yep, we will try things like collard greens. We've planted that in here, or chives. We have a starfruit tree that I'll show you in here in just a second. And then third, we do rely on our chefs as well to tell us, hey, we're running low on, for a while there, when we first opened, there was an issue with romaine lettuce. So we actually took out a bunch of the lettuce that we had growing in here, and we replaced it specifically with romaine. That way we could help support those chefs and get some of that produce onto their tables. Very good question. So I'm going to travel a little bit further here because I do want to show, I think it was Michael that had asked about some of the data that we collect in here and how we try to quantify things. So this is our dashboard. This dashboard here is accessible to students. It's accessible to us as growers. But what I love about it is up in the upper left-hand side, it tells us alerts. If there's something going wrong in here, we're able to try to quickly address it. It also lets us know, hey, how much photosynthetic light, how much PAR is going through our system. Do we have enough photosynthesis going on, or do we need to up our light frequency? What's the temperature? You know, sometimes some of the requests that we get are for very tropical plants, and that means that we need to make sure that our water temperature and our air temperature falls within that range for that plant, while still being within the guidance for our fish to be able to survive. We wouldn't want to get it too hot in here and our fish don't like it, because fish, they're the drivers of the system, and we need to make sure that they're nice and healthy. Good questions. Now this is also, we can manipulate this dashboard and we can change it around. So that kind of goes to the point of, and I'll kind of sneak over here. Let's say I want to know about my fruits. We put all of our harvest data in here. So I want to know, because we usually sell ours by ounces. But let's say I want to know how successful a specific area is for our leafy greens. Now, leafy greens up here on 1021, we've harvested 483 ounces of leafy greens, which I can safely say was lettuce, from the top of our mezzanine. Now, that allows me as a grower to know, hey, I can push that, and I can make sure that I have enough lettuce available to be able to sell to all of our different off-takers. It also helps me as a grower to know, oh man, there is an issue going on somewhere in here, and we might not be able to make harvest in 3 weeks. So I need to reach out to that chef, you know, reach out to Tony over at the Hilton and let him know, I'm really sorry, something's up. We're gonna try and troubleshoot it, but in 3 weeks, we're not gonna be able to hit that amount for delivery. And that gives him ample time to be able to plan to find another vendor to kind of swoop in and make sure that they have enough to put out on those plates. All right. Now I do also see, do you have adult classes or accept volunteers? Oh, I love that question. So I'm gonna flip back around here just so you guys can see our wonderful plants. We do accept adult volunteers in a normal non-COVID situation. So unfortunately right now, due to COVID, only essential staff are permitted in our building. However, once we overcome that hurdle of COVID, we do accept volunteers. So if you yourself want to come in and volunteer in our system, you are more than welcome to. It's the same protocol as though you were volunteering at another school. So there are some clearances. I have a very small packet that I would send out to you. You just have to reach out to me. I can have you fill out that packet, and then you're able to come in. The only caveat that I add to that is during non-COVID times, we have students in here all the time. And I only mention that because some adults have feelings about students sometimes. But our students, I had 70 interns last year. They were phenomenal. And the way that we approach it is, it doesn't matter if you're in 7th grade, 12th grade, or you're an adult volunteer, we have a train the trainer model. So when you come in, you may be paired with me, you might be paired with Susie Q, who's a 10th grader, but we will make sure that we can train you up if you do choose to come in here as a volunteer. And volunteers can come in for a single day, or they can volunteer more often. It just depends on what your schedule is and what ours is and how they jive. At the end, I'll share our website that has the email address that you can use to reach out to get that paperwork. All right, so behind me, in bright purple land, we have a mixture of blue and red lights to help promote growth in our system. And I do want to point out some of the plants that we have growing right now. We have basil. We have a bit of an out of control basil situation right here. But mainly that's because we want to make pesto with students in a live classroom session, in a Zoom session. And we want to show them walnuts versus pine nuts, toasting them versus not toasting them. And then we're going to have a taste test, because there's me and 3 other members of my team. And we want students to kind of understand, okay, well, what goes into pesto? Is it just the pesto that you buy at the grocery store? What if you want to make it at home? Okay, if you don't have pine nuts, can you use walnuts? All of that kind of fun stuff we want to dive into with students. And again, teaching them a little bit of how to cook, because you can, of course, speaking to the choir, or preaching to the choir, you can make pesto without having to use a blender or some of the other common household kitchen items. You can smash it together. So it makes it a little bit easier for students, especially if they don't have, you know, a blender or a Ninja or a food processor. We also have lemongrass. We did have an off-taker reach out from an Asian restaurant, and he asked if we're able to grow lemongrass. And this guy here is actually a cutting that we did from the original plant that got really huge. Unfortunately, that particular restaurant closed due to COVID. So we just kind of have his remnant here. Hopefully, once that passes as well, that restaurant will be able to reopen. As I kind of turn here, we have our tomato garden right there. We have tomatoes. We also have a pineapple. Again, some of this may seem a little hodgepodgey, but our students are the ones that a lot of times reach out and say, can you grow a pineapple? Sure. And then pineapple in particular is just a unique plant to be able to view because not a lot of students really know what a pineapple plant looks like. So for us, we can help show them what it looks like and bring them through that growth cycle. Because again, if we can grow it locally here in Harrisburg, have a Harrisburg pineapple, I mean, number one, that's a super fun thing to put on your menu. But number two, it also helps from that educational aspect with students. Always goes back to the education. So next, I want to show you guys just very briefly, as I walk through here, the different types of grow beds that we have. Because we do try to grow things a little bit differently to show students that, hey, if you ever want to set up your own aquaponics lab, there's a few different ways that you'd be able to do this. Now here, I kind of want to highlight our Swiss chard. Swiss chard is something we actually used. We gave to Chef Patty. I don't know if you remember that from I think that was last farm show in one of the big bins for the cooking station.
Of course you do. Yes, yes. So a lot of those leafy greens, your 5-star lettuce mix, I believe.
Yep, we had the 5-star lettuce mix for students, and they absolutely adored it, and it just cracked me up how much they liked it. But for us, in here in the slope beds, we have all of that nutrient-rich water, and then here you have the Swiss chard over here, and we have peppers right here that we're growing. But all of their roots dip down into that nutrient-rich water. Again, it cleans that water, so when it goes back to the tank, again, nice and clean, nice and healthy for our fish, but it also helped our plants to grow. I'll also very briefly show you guys this station. We're actually a part of the Tomato Sphere project. It's where we received tomato plants from NASA. So some of those seeds actually were outside of the gravity of Earth. And some of those seeds were mixed in just normal, regular tomatoes. We as the grower don't know what we have. We are going to go through kind of a blind experiment trying to grow them out on this seed rack here. And then once they germinate, we're going to hypothesize with students which ones were the ones that were in space, which ones were the ones that are just native to Pennsylvania. So it should be a pretty out of this world experiment with students that we're really looking forward to. And I'm going to take you guys over here next, just because it's slightly not as bright to show you guys this. So I mentioned that we have aquaponics, but we also have hydroponics. Now this guy here, and I'm sorry, I want to make sure I don't give everybody a headache by trying to move this around too much. There we go. So we have lettuce that's growing out of here, and this guy is actually hydroponics. So he is not hooked up to any of our fish tanks. This unit, we actually dose with hydroponic or nutrient fluid to help it grow. What's really nice about these tower gardens is we get to control the types of nutrients. So if there's something that we really want to try to grow that requires an excess amount of magnesium or zinc, we can add magnesium and zinc right into this unit to help those plants to grow. Another example of that, as I kind of flip around, is honestly the students' favorite, which are our bananas. We have been able to successfully grow bananas now twice here in our lab, both of which, when you do grow bananas in aquaponics, these guys are aquaponics, we actually have to add potassium to the water. We add enough potassium that it's still safe for the fish, but that it allows, when these guys start to fruit, it allows for that potassium to help that to flower and to grow. And our two varieties, we have our regular Cavendish. This guy's the Cavendish banana. This is your grocery store banana. But then we also have our Musa ice cream banana. And that one actually hasn't flowered yet. It hasn't fruited yet for us. Now, I don't really know if it's true that a Musa ice cream banana tastes like vanilla ice cream. I've read about it. I've had students that have had a Musa ice cream banana before and have assured me that it does taste like that. But I'll say I'll be very disappointed if in 6 months or a year we finally get this guy to flower and it doesn't taste that way. Because we've had quite a few successes with our traditional banana, but our Musa ice cream is a little bit finicky. So we're still trying to play around and figure out, okay, what's going on with him? Why is he not fruiting? Why is he not flowering? Now, the other one that we have is our star fruit. And our star fruit is actually getting a little bit out of control. Our high school elective class decided that they really wanted a star fruit tree. And so we purchased this guy and he's getting huge. There are a ton of flowers that are coming off of this guy. We haven't gotten any fruit yet. We just got this in at the end of last school year. So it usually takes about 2 years for our trees to start fruiting. So we're hoping to expect something sooner rather than later. One of which I can show you guys, because the other big guy that we have in here is our cacao. Now we are sad to say, well, I'm sad to say because we tried so hard. These guys have produced pods. We do have cacao pods or cocoa pods in our system. See if I can find him there for you. And we had one about 3 weeks ago. This is what the pod looks like. It's about this big to my hand right here. You can see him. He's going to get about twice as big. But the reason I'm a little sad is we did our research. We tried our best to figure out how to harvest this pod and make chocolate, and we totally blew it. It did not turn out well. We got mold on it. We have no idea what we did wrong. So we're hoping the second trial here with the second pod will be successful, especially considering the fact that it did take us 2 years to grow these pods. We have a few more pods coming off of this, guys. So even if we aren't successful, we have a few more trials that we can still undergo. But overall, a little nervous because I'll fully admit that I'm not a chef. Trying. But that one was a bit of a failure. All right, so next, I just wanted to point out that we do have, I would say 99.9% of our items in here are all items that we can eat. But we do have a handful, there's 3 items total that aren't things that we harvest as a food source. One of them is our koi fish. You can eat koi, but we of course don't do that. It's considered a sacred fish in Japan. We have them as another example for aquaponics that you can use an aquaponic growing facility for more than just one type of fish. We also chose koi because they're pretty. They really are engaging to some of our younger learners. We are a K through 12 school, but sometimes we have pre-K students that come through for activities, and these guys are fun to look at. They're fun to draw, not to knock on our tilapia, but we don't name our tilapia because they're gonna wind up in our belly. These guys, if someone wants to name them, they can, because we're not going to wind up eating them at the end of their life cycle. Now, earlier someone had asked about rooting vegetables, so I do want to show you guys our big bed here. So we're doing the Three Sisters Garden. I'm not sure how many of you may have heard of that or are familiar with the Three Sisters Garden, but that's where you grow corn, squash, and beans, and each type of plant that you have helps to promote the health of the other plant. So your squash helps to protect the base of both of your beans and also the base of your corn. The corn helps all of the beans to grow because as the corn gets larger, the beans will wind around the stalk. And of course, the corn's helping the beans out because it provides an area for them to grow. So we're trying this experiment out with our students with special needs because we want to show them how plants can get along like people can get along. But it also is an opportunity for us to try some different types of vegetables that we haven't been able to grow out in our main system. Because we've tried in this bed, which we just got done replanting, we tried potatoes in this bed, we've tried coconut in this bed, neither of which were successful, unfortunately. They actually, the potatoes in particular, they rotted out on the very bottom. The reason being that, again, as a float bed, it's growing down into that water. So the key in that type of grow cycle is to make sure that we have enough oxygen in the beds to prevent that rot from occurring. We have been able to successfully grow radishes. I believe they were rainbow colored on the inside. I'm trying to remember the name of the variety. But we were able to grow some rooting vegetables, but it's definitely a challenge in our system, mainly because of the oxygenation and just how wet it is as it grows down. Now, the place that we've tried it with a little bit more success is actually on the other side of this bed. I know it's a little bit more difficult to see, but you have a bed here that's floating, but on this side is actually a media bed. And that side, we have rocks that help to suspend that vegetable material. These rocks are also used for our trees. They help to keep the roots in place so the trees don't topple over, or the plants, like the banana plant, doesn't topple over. So we have a few different areas where we do plan on trying that experiment again. Potatoes is just one of those things that our kids love and they really want to try out. Bring you to our next area here. Because I do want to show that not everything in here is rainbows and lollipops. We try our best to be rainbows and lollipops, but sometimes we run into a few issues. So I want to still share those with you as chefs. That way you can kind of see what we're training our students to identify. That way, again, as we harvest that produce, they know right away, oh, you know, Mrs. Johnson, we went to harvest this and X, Y, and Z are wrong. We don't really feel confident that we should send this over to an off-taker because it's really not the best caliber. Ooh, so great question in the Q&A. Someone has a koi pond with some fish in it, and they're asking if they can utilize that for aquaponics. The answer to that question is absolutely, yes, you can. We have a elementary principal, same thing. She moved into a home, had a koi pond. You just have to be clever with how you run the water through your system. Depending on how your koi pond is set up, you want to make sure that you have an area that waste product moves into, that it can kind of live in there with that bacteria to convert that waste from the koi fish into the nutrients for the plants. The way she does it is her koi fish area is raised up a little bit. And what her husband and her did is they actually made like a little gradual slope. So that way when it rains, it just pushes that water over the top gradually and it moves out into their flower beds. Now for them, it's a little bit hit or miss because they don't have a holding area for that waste product. But overall, she told me it worked really well last spring and summer when they did plant their garden. So yes, you can. The other great thing when you do already have, a fish tank or, a koi bed, that water is full of nutrients. So some people in aquaponics, they can even scoop that water right out of there and pour it onto kind of the soil-based traditional type of agriculture to get that nutrient down. That also works just as well. It's kind of the power of fish and fish waste, if you will. So, also another good question. What plants would be harmful to grow with fish? So right now, we've not come across any that have been harmful or detrimental to our fish. We launched in December of 2018 as a grow facility. So we're still doing a lot of guess and check work. Some aquaponic facilities can grow 5-star lettuce beautifully. Very disappointingly, we can't seem to grow 5-star lettuce. Butter lettuce, green, traditional romaine, nailed it. 5-star lettuce, I don't know why. Something's funky with that. So we're not able to grow it here. Now, types of plants that we've tried a little of everything from Venus flytraps. We actually grew those using what's called tissue culture, and then we planted them on our system. We've done the potatoes, we've done squash, we've had mango in here, avocado. We had a big, huge palm tree. All of those things, even though some of them require more nutrients, less nutrients, different types of nutrients, none of those plants have ever harmed our fish. I've also traveled quite extensively to visit other aquaponic systems, and I've never heard of a specific plant that would be detrimental to the fish. The only thing you have to watch out for is your fish have certain grow parameters. For example, our tilapia, they love our 76-degree temperature water. They're in it to win it. But there are some plants that grow best with lower temperatures, some that grow best with different pH or different levels of things like ammonia or iron. Those are all things just to take a look at to make sure that, first and foremost, whatever fish you're choosing to grow, you want to match or overlap the parameters of your plants. If you make it unsurvivable for your fish, you're not going to have any nutrients for your plants. But typically, it's pretty easy to figure out how to do that just through a simple Google search. There's a lot of research that's available online. And even with us, if you ever want us to try something out, we love suggestions from chefs. From chefs and from other providers, I actually have an agave that's growing in here because another provider said, hey, can you grow agave in there? And I said, I have no idea. Let's get a plant and try it out. So if there's something even you'd like us to try out, we would be more than happy to. Sorry, my finger kind of goes up there. But I did want to quickly kind of show you guys, again, that it's not all rainbows, lollipops, and sprinkles. We do have issues in our facility, just like most greenhouse facilities. Right now, we have this guy, which is called spider mite. There's a lot of webbing in some parts of our system. But spider mites in general, they're detrimental to your plant, and it also makes your facility look a little bit wonky. So in our system, the reason I like pointing these guys out to you is that although we sometimes do get infestations of different types of bugs, these guys dictate how we treat them. And I'll make that a little bit more even for you. So our tilapia, drivers of our system. So if we have insects in here, if we get a weird mold or virus or fungi, we can't just spray it with pesticides because those pesticides would get into the water and they would hurt my fish. So we need to be very careful with the types of biological controls that we utilize in our system. And the way that we do that is, we have no pesticides whatsoever that we spray. What we do is we buy a good bug that eats the bad bug. If any of you have ever had ladybird beetles or ladybugs, ladybugs tend to be really good because they just eat a lot of other kinds of bugs. Generally, spiders are good in the system. If you have 8 legs, I tell kids don't squish it because we have bugs in here and that spider will eat my bugs. So overall, I just want to let you guys know as off-takers that when we harvest our produce and we drop it off, it's never been sprayed with anything. It's never been touched after it forms its 2 true leaves and we plant it into our system. No one touches it until we go to harvest. And all of our students are trained on food safety and HAZCOM to make sure that when they do harvest produce, that they're harvesting it in the cleanest and most effective way. We do double check their work before we take it out for delivery. During harvest, it's usually pretty hectic in here. Everyone's washing their hands, everyone's putting their gloves on, they're sanitizing their shears, they're getting ready to get everything into our big bags that we then take to off-takers. So that whole process, we oversee that very closely to make sure that they're properly trained on handling food. We also, of course, have our refrigerators here that we train students to check every day. It's a part of that tedium sometimes, but it's important that somebody does check the refrigerators to make sure that they're storing our food properly so that way no bacteria is growing on our produce. So I do want to pause really quick to see if there's any questions from the group. I know I covered a lot right there with my biological controls.
I have a couple.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt again. I can't add them in there. So So you're talking about bugs. I noticed you're not swarming around with bees. Talk about how pollination happens.
Oh, that is such a good question. So I will point out, I got laughed at. Let me double check. I want to see if he's still in here. Roberto might still be in here, which is fine if he is. I feel like sometimes my ideas are a little bit too wacky. But I did put a proposal in to get bees for our system, which sounds extra psychotic because you're working with kids and anaphylactic shock. There's some hurdles to that. I'm still hoping I'll be able to get bees in a section in here in research and development. But what we do is we actually purchase self-pollinating plants. So they're made up of male and female in the flower, so that way they can self-pollinate. What's interesting in our system is we don't have any wind. I'll bring up the corn as an example because we have a student that loved growing corn in our system, and I give massive amounts of kudos to that kiddo because when we do plant something that doesn't self-pollinate, one of the pros of having bugs in here every once in a while is as those guys crawl from plant to plant, it actually takes the pollen from one plant, transports it to the other one, so there's pollination that can happen there without bees. But because we're pretty good with our biological controls, so we don't have a lot of insects, what that means is that if you plant something like corn in here, wind won't move that pollen around, which means that we have to self-pollinate everything. And self-pollination is a very long and tedious task. We had a student that just loved growing corn in here, and he was such a trooper because if anyone ever has seen somebody move pollen and do self-pollination or do pollination by hand, you literally take a mechanism, you put it underneath where the pollen will fall, and you kind of bang on the plant, and then you move to the next plant and you gently try to shake the pollen onto it, and it takes a very long amount of time. So I give a kudos to that kiddo for wanting to do corn and be willing to do that kind of transfer. But if we have bugs, that will do it. If not, we have to do it by hand. Which again, volunteers. Well, we accept volunteers. It's all part of the fun things that we get to learn about. What happens to the food waste? So great question again. We have a student that wrote a proposal for a compost mechanism here. But we actually turned out that we really didn't need the compost because we have a few staff that are farmers. Specifically, they raise chickens. So we have our regular bag that goes to the chefs that we weigh out. We put our harvest data on that dashboard. Then we have our chicken feed bag. And then we put an all call out to our farmers and we just say, hey, if you want to come back, chicken feed bags are here. Just come on and check them out. Is there caviar in our future? So I saw a really good YouTube video with Gordon Ramsay where they were doing raising fish for caviar that was local to the States, and he was somehow blown away by it. I don't know if we're ready yet for caviar. Our students grow very attached to our fish, and so do our staff. So when we did our harvest this past week to PJ over at Susquehanna Harvest, we actually had a few staff members that wanted to leave for a little bit because it's a little bit traumatic when you scoop your fish out and throw them in ice. Good, very good questions.
I had another question, if I could, please.
Sure.
You had lemongrass and pineapple and all different plants in one bed. How do you determine what plants be in one bed, and are there any plants that definitely should not be within the same source of water? But I guess most of them are in the same source of water in some way.
So let me actually I might be able to turn and show. Okay, so in this particular bed, we have a few larger plants and trees. What we find is if you put too many items that are flowering in the same bed, that taxes the system. Once a plant starts to flower, it sucks a lot of nutrients out of the water. So if you have too many plants that are flowering, that are forming their flowers at the same time or using all of that energy at the same time, you're going to get really bad looking fruit, for lack of a better way to put it. Our first round of bananas actually turned out that way. We put potassium in the water to help supplement and make sure that it can grow. But it turns out that we had other things flowering at the same time that also were very heavy users of potassium. So it just completely depleted the bed. And we do chemical analysis of our water and also of our plants. So when our bananas were about this big, they still tasted like a Cavendish banana. They were just the saddest, tiniest banana I've ever seen. So what we found was it can be overly taxing to a bed if you have too many flowering plants in it.
Thank you. And one other question, kind of comment, you mentioned that you have aquaponics, hydroponics, and then the aeroponics I know I can see. So I just want to make sure you were still going to touch on those too.
Yes. So I had mentioned that there are about 99% of what we grow in here we eat. With aeroponics, that's the second example. Our koi we don't harvest to eat. Now these guys, you can kind of see them in the distance. We have this guy here, that one there. We have 7 different spheres affixed to our ceilings that have a plant called a succulent. Some of you may be familiar with that. They're, when I grew up, if you had someone that had a green thumb, I guess that's what you put it, that killed plants left and right, you gave them a cactus. Nowadays, you gift them a succulent because they're very, very easy to take care of. With aeroponics, all you have to do is spray the roots of that plant. That's kind of the fundamental definition of aeroponics. So we spray these guys down 3 times a week. We also have those tower gardens. Those ones can be run hydroponically or aeroponically. So as the water kind of drips down on those big towers, we can choose to have it spray the roots or we can have it drip. Aeroponics and hydroponics, they're very close cousins. Same thing with aquaponics as well. But Patty, thank you for pointing that out. I was going to mention aeroponics when I was talking about the koi fish, and I missed that one.
And I can't let you move on without, I asked you a year ago, do you have to climb a ladder to water them?
No. So we have a mechanism that lowers all of our succulents. That way we don't have to worry about getting onto a ladder. The only time we have to climb is when we clean our tanks, which happens every week. Also another good question came through the Q&A pod about farm show. So every year since we built our facility, we have had a footprint over at farm show. This year it's a little bit iffy because we're virtual, but we have a mobile aquaponics trailer that goes all across the state. And for farm show, we actually get that guy up and running. We decommission it typically in the winter because keeping plants and fish alive on a mobile trailer in Pennsylvania is really difficult to do. So we decommission that typically in winter, but we get it up and running for farm show. While we're at farm show, we use it more for educational. We haven't sold produce over there. We do a lot of donations. So as an example, right now, the majority of what we grow is donated to the Central Penn Food Bank. During farm show, we do provide produce to the giant area where they cook everything up that Chef Patty helps out at. So we find ourselves more in a donation pattern when we go over to farm show. We may change that in the future just because we do have quite a big group of kids that are entrepreneurs and they really want to learn the basics of, well, how do I price point this? How do I sell it and still make enough money to make a living? How do I work with the community when I go to sell my produce? So that's definitely something on the table. We just haven't tried it yet. There's also the market right across the street at farm show. I'm not sure if this week is the last week, but every Tuesday and Friday, they have a market there. We're also investigating whether or not we could put a produce stand there as well.
So I know we have a lot of chefs on the line. If someone wanted to, for their restaurant, contact you to be able to maybe grow something or, you know, to start purchasing things, how would they go about doing that?
So in order to reach out to me, you can send me an email. Our email address, and it may be easier for me to hit our settings and put that in there for everybody to check out. If you Google Agworks at CCA, you can visit our website, and that website has my email address on it. It's just agworks at ccaeducate.me. But I'm also going to put that here in the chat for everybody if I can get the chat back up. But that's the easiest way, because if there's something that you're looking for as a chef that we currently grow, that's a little bit easier. If there's something that you want us to try out for you to see if we can maybe grow it routinely for you, we'd also be more than willing to try that out. We are in Harrisburg, so there is a limitation for us to be able to deliver. So that's kind of the only thing you should keep in mind. If you're from York, for example, it's too far for us to be able to deliver. But if you're in the Harrisburg area, or if you're just interested in general and just want to know if you're in our radius, how much it costs, all that fun stuff, you can Google us, or you can reach out to me directly at Agworks at ccaeducate.me. And I'm typing this into the chat for everybody too. ccaeducate.me. So I put that in the chat just in case anybody would like to reach out directly. I will point out too, right now we're not quite at full production. The main reason being that we don't have students to help us run the entire facility. I'll point that out only because there were two items that I skipped over today. The first one I'll show you is over here before I walk. This machine right here is called a RotoGrow. We can fit over 400 plants in that machine. However, it takes about 16 man-hours a week to operate that machine itself and keep everything clean, pest-free, trimmed up. So for us, without students, it's just not possible for us to operate that machine. What's awesome about that one, it's hydroponics, so we dose it. But what's great about it is it actually promotes a healthier, firmer stem. So if a chef lets us know, like, hey, your lettuce is really soft and supple because it's grown inside, it didn't have to get really hardy fighting the wind, we can try and grow it in that machine, and it actually changes the texture of the plant. So those guys right now, we don't have them up and running, but again, after COVID and after we can get my student workers back in here, my interns, we can get that guy operational again, which means we can sell to more potential clients. The other one that I skipped over, and I'll kind of shift my camera around, same basic principle. We have this giant microgreen station here. Microgreens are phenomenal. They're always, always in vogue at a lot of restaurants. We have, let's see, I think it's about 16 different trays that we could grow microgreens on. We've tried a wide variety of microgreens. We've been very successful with operating that machine. Right now, as you can see, it is decommissioned. The main reason being that, again, we don't have our students here to help operate that machinery. So again, once we are able to get students back in here and more workers, more hands-on capability, then we'll be able to get that machine operational again. So microgreens, leafy greens, all sorts of fun stuff that we're able to grow in here will be fully available once we can expand outside of essential staff. Oh, smaller starter kits. So I do, and I can actually show you one. I'll flip my screen around and walk around my sister garden here. It's getting a little bit out of control. It depends on how big you want to start with. Now, if you send me an email to the email address that I put in the chat, I can send you directions on building something a little bit bigger. But there is something called Back to Your Roots, this guy right here. That's actually a very small aquaponic unit. We had somebody actually donate that system to us. You can see at the top there are 3 different trays. In these 3 trays, we've grown microgreens. We've done a head of lettuce in here. Of course, it turns out very small. But this unit is powered by just 1 fish to keep it operational. Back to Your Roots, that has shown to be a pretty good kit that you can purchase at Home Depot as an example. But if you're looking for something a little bit bigger, a little bit sturdier, that gives you more variation in the types of things you want to plant, I do have it's a suggested kit that you can assemble at home. If you send me an email, I can respond to you with directions. It actually even has a schematic on how to set it up. And then you can vary it based on what you'd like to grow. Good questions. right now. I know we're running a little bit past our time. Does anyone have any final questions for the group? And again, you can feel free to email me questions afterwards as well. I'd be more than happy to field them.
And while we're waiting to see if any more questions come in, I am going to post this video, send it out, and also with your email attached, because I've heard many times, send me an email, send me an email. So that way I'm sure follow-up questions still coming your way there too. I see a couple more questions rolling in.
And yeah, I'm always the one that has to, that I shouldn't say has to speak live, but I always like talking about what it is that we do here. So I always get really excited when I'm like, check out our fish, check out our koi. Even, you know, I mentioned we had a palm tree in here. I killed that palm tree about 6 months ago because I let an infestation run rampant in it because I didn't catch it fast enough. I also killed the mango. But both of those I kind of laugh about because they're good learning experiences. And for us, we're very fortunate in our space that we're educational. So our main goal is not to generate revenue, it's to show kids what it takes to grow produce that looks good enough, tastes good enough, that people like you guys want to purchase it. All part of the fun.
And I can attest, yes, she is always this excited about it, and you can tell you're an educator because anytime there was a question, you had pretty much, you know, summed it up there as we went along.
I even wore my chef jacket, and my team made me a chef hat today, but I didn't want to wear it during the presentation because that's too much pandering. But I wanted to show it to you guys at the end.
That's great. Well, thank you so very much. I mean, this was awesome. I'm glad everyone else got the inside sneak peek and, you know, a great overview. I know when I talked about aquaponics, some were, what is that? And I just did a quick copy and paste of, you know, a quick definition, but this was great and a definite good inside view. And I certainly learn something every time I hear you speak. So thank you so very much. If anyone has any last minute questions, otherwise, like I said, I will include in the email your direct contact information. That way, if anyone else, I know there's a couple of your, let me say, clients on the meeting here as well. So I know Chef Reese, who you worked with for a long time here, getting products for the Hilton as well. And again, thank you so much. This was definitely very awesome. Very, very much appreciated. And I think in the chat too, got a whole lot of thank yous. Excellent. And this was great, definitely. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you guys, and enjoy the rest of your day or evening. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. We do give virtual tours and tours like this if requested. And we love spreading the word about what we do here in Harrisburg. So again, thank you guys so much. Chef Patty, thank you as well for inviting me to speak to the group.
Thank you, Sam. Appreciate it. Have a great night.
Bye, guys.